Hello and welcome everyone to DigiTales, episode 56. My name is Faizan Sayed, founder and CEO of Eastriver, and today I have with me someone from Dubai, Dhiren Harchandani. He is a proptech entrepreneur, property technology entrepreneur with successful exits in Dubai. But what's interesting is he's lived around the world. He was born in Bombay, grew up in Manila, studied, and then worked in the US only to move back to Dubai. So he's going to give us some very interesting perspectives on how to be an entrepreneur. And now, as he coaches people to be the best version of themselves, he's going to tell us how we can be the best version of ourselves. How are you doing, Dhiren?
Very well. Thanks for having me, Faizan.
Thank you so much. And so, first of all, I have to kick off on this. I see your Instagram, and you are an avid athlete. Is that something you were always like interested in, running, cycling, doing all of those outdoor things in Dubai's heat?
No, I started my access point really to sports was in school. In school, I used to get bullied quite a bit. And it was at a time when things were really intense in terms of the bullying that used to take place in school. And the only way I could actually escape that and fit in was with sports. And that's when I started really getting involved in sports. And everything changed after I got involved in sports.
Really? How is that? How does sports involvement help with bullying at school?
I think it makes you mentally stronger. It also, it's also because basketball was what I started playing. It was the first sport that I really played.
So it's a team sport. You get to know everyone. And you've got your boys taking care of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you develop leadership skills, and you develop, that ability to be able to connect and relate and work within a team. So once I started getting involved in sports, everything, my whole childhood shifted completely.
Wow. And it also, I'm assuming it also gave you a lot of confidence to be able to sort of go up to bullies and kind of counter them.
Absolutely. It did. Yeah, without a doubt. Confidence was definitely something that got a major upgrade once I started playing sports.
And how did that help you when you went to college and then ended up in Silicon Valley?
Which part exactly?
Right when you went to college and then you discovered a career that you wanted to have in the Valley in, let's say, technology. Because technology is full of people who are super smart, who can shake your confidence because they talk about things that sometimes even most people don't understand.
Yeah.
Right? So how does that sort of skill set development help you when you enter such a competitive environment? And then you shone in that environment as well.
So I was very fortunate to be in consulting as my first, my first foray in my career was in consulting. And in consulting, you come in as the expert, right? Mm-hmm. They bring in a consultant to help fix or address a very specific problem or opportunity that they're looking to address. And so I would be on a desk with, a couple of founders who had this vision, but they may not have had the technology skills to be able to materialize that vision. Conversely, I would be in a Fortune 50 or Fortune 100 environment wherein, change management was very defined, right? And it hindered the ability of the team or teams to innovate. And so I was able to really leverage my skills in sports and, the teamwork that I would learn from that regard and parlay it into my consulting journey. Again, it comes down to teamwork. It comes down to really understanding what motivates this individual, what motivates this team, right? What's their why? Why do they do what they do? And so once you're able to key into that question, I think it's very, that's the access point to getting people to perform at their next level.
And so Simon Sinek touches about this "what's your why" concept of quite a bit. And you were touching on it as you were consulting, yet somehow, somewhere you discovered that your why was entrepreneurship. How did that happen?
So I didn't know my why when I was consulting. This was not a question that I asked myself.
Right.
Uh, it was very early in my career, and I was trying to make a mark. The first half, or the first, if you look at your career in in three parts, the first part is you're just trying to learn as much as possible, right? You're a sponge. You're just trying to learn, and that was my consulting career or journey. Was I was trying to learn. Later on in my career, I realized that why am I not doing this for myself? I had enough confidence in myself and my ability to be able to, take an organization or a team and get them aligned and working toward a common goal. So I asked myself, well, why am I not doing this for myself, right? And that's when the entrepreneurial journey really began. It's again, we all get into entrepreneurship because of freedom. I believe that there are three reasons, right? One of the main reasons we get into entrepreneurship is for personal freedom. And when I was consulting, I didn't have much freedom. I remember days when I would work 36 hours straight, and I would be sleeping at my desk. That was the life of a consultant, right? And
I remember it reminds me of my days as a banker, and you're absolutely right. You just wouldn't go. You go home to change your shirt. Yes.
Yeah, and take a shower.
Take a shower, yeah.
If you have enough time.
True. And so, yeah, why? And so the question is, and that was the question I had for myself, exactly that. Why should I put in all this time for someone else when I can do it for myself?
Yeah. And the freedom aspect is key, right? That personal freedom is something that, is the major driver for most entrepreneurs. But one thing you realize much later is that, and at least in my coaching, I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they get into it for the freedom, but then end up being, enslaved by the business.
So
right?
They're trapped by the freedom.
They're trapped by the freedom, or they're not, they lose sight of why they got into entrepreneurship.
Right.
Of course, that's changing now with, the impact mindset and
Right.
balancing impact with profit or profit with impact. But it's still quite prevalent. Of course, the pandemic has changed things. A lot of people are asking themselves, why am I doing this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's given a lot of people a lot of perspective.
True. And so you then decided you made this shift, but you stayed true to the technology consulting that you were focused on, but you went into proptech. Walk me through how that transition happened. How did you end up in the property space?
It was so. If you remember, in 2006, the UAE, or specifically Dubai, was moving from the lower left of the chart to the upper right of the chart in terms of real estate. There were a lot of developments taking place in commercial, residential, retail, and I saw an opportunity in a lot of the freehold buildings here did not have the tech to actually manage these buildings. They didn't have the tech to be able to provide services to the residents in the community. They didn't have the ability to be able to collect payments for maintenance dues. So I saw a gap in the market, and that's how I got into proptech.
Interesting. And so you went on and you had a couple of successful exits, you mentioned.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so once you exit, so you got into entrepreneurship, you built and scaled a couple of businesses, sold the businesses. And then what happens is after you've done the entrepreneurship, you've achieved the personal freedom, where does an entrepreneur go from there? What could they find that is equally harrowing, that requires a village of people to support you when you're failing all the way up until you're not?
Endurance sports.
Endurance sports. And so that explains the cycling and the running and everything that I saw on your Instagram. You're like, okay, you know what? I'm done with that, but let me find the similar traits and apply them every day.
Yeah, I'm not done with that. I mean, entrepreneurship, I'm working on a couple of things at the moment, and entrepreneurship is something that is very, very near and dear to me.
Right.
I think the idea of creating something from nothing, right? And that there's something very mesmerizing and captivating about that idea.
Right.
But transitioning to endurance sports, yeah, I mean, endurance sports, there are a lot of parallels between endurance sports and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
As you said, I mean, it takes a village to support an entrepreneur, and endurance sports is no different. It takes a village to support an endurance athlete.
Is it? Do you think it's a type of person? Because I find that a lot of entrepreneurs enjoy endurance sports. Is it a type of person that just wants to spend their entire days like beating themselves up, whether it's for a business, or whether it's for a run or an Ironman or a bike ride? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I remember one of my first managers told me something I'll never forget. I had just gotten married, and he basically looked at me. He's like, Dhiren, if you want to be really productive, have a kid, have children. And I kind of scratched my head and wondered, how does that even possible? I mean, kids will, obviously they take time, right? You
Right.
have to spend that time with your children, nurture them, communicate with them. So how is that possible? But what I realized, what he meant was, because when you have children, now all of a sudden you have limited time, right? You've just lost a significant part of your bandwidth. And now
Mm-hmm.
that you have limited bandwidth, you're that much more focused on how you deploy that bandwidth. How do you deploy that time? So I'm going to add something to what he said, which is, if you want to be really productive, have children and take up endurance sports. And I do think it's a specific type of person. But
Yeah.
then it's a specific type of person who wants to push themselves to a point wherein they discover what they're really capable of.
But what do you do with that? I mean, I ask this because I'm sort of in the same boat because I recently took up training for a marathon. As I was telling you earlier, I just completed my first half marathon ever, like 21K, and to observe the way my body behaves during and after was enlightening. And now I'm excited for the next 21K and hit the 42. But then what? Like, what do I get out of this?
Let me ask you a question. So you talk about your body. What happened to your mind in the process?
I mean, I pushed my mind. There was moments where my mind said, "We're done. Like you cannot finish the remaining." So I was at 18, and I think I was starting to dehydrate, and my body said, "No, we're done. There's no way we're making it." My mind's like, "Nah, come on, just another half a kilometer." Or okay, you know what? Go to that lamppost. And my mind kept playing these like little games with my body. Okay, we're gonna go to that lamppost, and you reach the lamppost. You go to the next lamppost, and you reach the other one, and then eventually 3 kilometers were covered.
So what you
And
did was you broke the problem down.
I broke the problem down to just small bite-sized
Bite size.
chunks, and I just ate each chunk slowly and then digested it and went to the next one.
So your mind was stretched from the experience.
Yeah, because I think that my mind realized that if I break it down and if I just keep myself motivated, I will be able to get there.
Okay. So your comfort zone has been expanded,
You can say that. Yeah, I
right?
would
I
say
mean,
that. Yeah, I'm
you are
more
not,
comfortable
yeah. Sorry, I was going
pushing
to say, you're
myself.
not the same Faizan post half marathon that you were pre half marathon.
I mean, there is some yeah, okay, fair enough. There is a perspective change. So yes, it is a tweaked version of me.
Yeah. I mean, you were rewired in ways that, that your mindset in terms of its resilience is not the same,
But what am
right?
I going to
Because
do with
next
that?
time,
What does anyone who's doing endurance sports do with that? Because are they applying it in some part of their life?
yeah, absolutely. I think subconsciously you're already applying it in your business, in your relationships, right? You're now looking at problems from a very different lens because you've been through, a very challenging phase or a challenging, what's the word I'm looking for? You've been through, an experience that you had to summon a very different part of you, right? Where there was this dogfight that was taking place inside you, where your body was fighting, saying, "Stop! Like this is madness. Like all we want is a couch and an espresso," while your
Yeah.
mind is like, "No, but we can do it. Like we're just gonna
Yeah.
get to that lamppost," right?
Yeah.
So it makes you better at life. Endurance sports is uh, is something that makes you better. Is a discipline that makes you better at life, right? Now, from a productivity perspective, because you're managing, I mean, it takes a lot of time to commit to a marathon or an ultra
Right.
marathon or a triathlon. So now that you have all this time that you are devoting to a sport, right? You have that much more less time with everything else, right? For life. So you're hyper focused in maximizing the time that you have. So what I've observed about my journey is that it's actually made me even more productive, not less.
So even though you're taxing your body like this, you are more productive, even though you have less time, because you're pushing yourself this way because you're using your time wisely.
You're using your time wisely. You're also fitness becomes an anchor, right? I mean, as we were discussing before we recorded, your lifestyle changes as you get deeper into the sport. You now start asking yourself, well, what are my priorities, right?
Right.
Like I used to go out quite a bit. I was very social. I used to drink. Uh, Once I started really getting deep into endurance sports, I started asking myself, okay, well, why was I doing all these things, right? All these commitments that I used to have, be it business, social, whatever
Hmm.
that may be. Now I'm putting it through a very different lens because I don't have that kind of time, right? So I need to reevaluate my priorities. So it gives you a different or a new lens in how to look at life.
Interesting. And so, how, when you did that, and it's funny that endurance sports is leading to life changes. When you got into this and you started looking at your life differently, did you end up losing some relationships that you may have realized were not the right relationships?
Absolutely.
How do you deal with that? That's got to be
Absolutely.
so hard.
But Faizan, if you're losing relationships, I asked myself, so when I made the decision that I was going to stop drinking,
That's a big one.
my my circle, my social circle got really small. A lot of people stopped calling me. Uh, and that's when I really discovered who my true friends were. And I realized that a lot of the friendships that I had, a lot of the circles that, were part of my social network were there because of a shared activity that we shared,
Not because of a bond.
not because of a bond. And also, I mean, keep in mind, I stopped drinking. I was much younger. I was in my early 30s.
Hmm.
And, it's very different from doing it in your early 40s, right? Because in your early 30s, everyone's like, what? Why are you doing this? Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. Like, why can't you just manage it, right? Um, so why can't you just be one of us?
Right.
It's almost like you've become an alien, right?
You're like the
So
pariah. You're the sanest, soberest one, and you're the pariah.
yeah, so it was tough. It was really tough. But did you know? I didn't know this, but behavioral science shows that majority of people at any given point in time in their life will have a habit that they're either trying to break or adopt. It's because in those moments, there are parts of our life and our business that are not working.
Yes, that makes sense.
They're not working as well as it should. So we may have problems, issues, difficulties, obstacles, whatever you want to call it, a pain point, right? That we're facing. And the reality is that all of those pain points, or majority of those pain points, this is behavioral science showing that majority of the pain points that we're going to have at any given point in our life, right, is driven by that one habit that we're either trying to break or adopt. So if I were to ask you to write down, right, all your pain points, your problems, your challenges that you're going through right now, right? And it's all in a spectrum, right? Some of them may be nuances, some of them may be major problems. But I bet you're going to be able to write down anywhere between 20 to 25 pain points.
Sure, fair point.
And 80% of them will be because of one habit that you're either trying to break or adopt. Now, for me, that one habit was my relationship with alcohol.
Interesting. Okay.
Although, I mean, I wasn't a huge drinker, but if I had to be really honest with myself, it was disruptive. It affected my lifestyle. It affected my ability to think clearly, and it slowed me down. And it affected my mood. It weakened my immune system, and it got me in situations that was subtly eroding, my confidence, my self-esteem. So I started noticing that on days that followed after I consumed alcohol, my thoughts were different. My head felt heavy, and you know like I said, when I would be out with friends, my conversations were just not of any depth or substance. So when I decided that I was going to break that habit, or when I realized that that one habit was the root cause to 27 pain points that I was experiencing, I was facing, that's when I decided, you know what, this has to go.
And
I
that
need to break
habit,
this habit.
and breaking that must have been extremely difficult,
It
because
was.
everything is, your identity in a sense is tied to it. Like you said, you lost most of your friends, your social circle became small. The things you enjoyed doing on weekends, weekdays with the people you were doing them with all disappeared. That's part of your identity.
And that's when I transitioned to, well, that's not, I mean, endurance sports came much later. But yeah, it was definitely a very dark phase. It was very challenging. Yeah,
And how
I
did you
mean,
get through that? So if endurance sports weren't there at that time, what did you rely on to get you through this sort of repurposing or retooling of your life, in a
I
sense?
distracted myself with business.
So you kept yourself busy with work.
I kept busy. I kept myself busy with work. Uh, I went to the deep end, and I did not know how to say no. And every opportunity that came my way, I jumped on, and that then cascaded into my dark night of the soul, my breaking point, where I had all multiple businesses all at the same time, and I was stretched really thin. And I went through that phase for about 3 years.
And how
Uh,
did you snap out
I don't
of
want
it?
to. Sorry.
How did you snap out of the darkness?
So this was back in 2012, and back then, mindfulness, uh, sports, endurance sports, for that matter, uh, you know, all these modalities, coaching, transformation, mentorship, these weren't trending mainstream back then
Right.
as it is now. So a lot of it was, you know, self-reflection. I had to basically really go within myself to understand my inner game and what was my why. Why was I doing what I was doing, right? Was it because of uh, an insecurity that I was trying to overcome? So there were a lot of what you know. I remember speaking to someone, and he told me, he said, "Look, Darren, what got you here is not going to get you to the next level, right?" Uh, and I basically got to a point where I lost about 14 kilos in 3 months. So I was
Wow,
literally
that's
at
a lot.
war with myself. I was at war with myself. My body was disintegrating. And I remember going to bed, and I would tell my wife that, look, I think we need to get our affairs in order, because I don't think, I feel like the end is around the corner. I was having these heart palpitations that were very intense. And, I did a battery of tests, saw a few specialists, and they all told me, look, there's no external cure. You need to rewire the way you think. And what will bring you happiness is not out there. It's in here. It's an inside game. So it took me a lot longer than I would have liked, 3 years is a long time to
That is a
be
long time to be in that
in the
state.
dark.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's a long time.
yeah.
And so then, was it at that point? So that ray of light. What was the ray of light that you saw? What was that kind of that pulled you? Were you able to then maybe break the problem into bite-sized chunks as you walked your way out of it?
The ray of light was endurance sports. Simply,
So
it
that's
was
when the
it. Yeah,
endurance sports came in. Okay, so then it was a
that's
new
when it.
distraction, but that new
There was a new
distraction
distraction.
gave you a new purpose, a new sort of ability to discover yourself.
Absolutely. And someone invited me to a 5K, and I didn't know how to. I mean, I couldn't run a kilometer,
Right.
and I did the 5K. Uh, I struggled, but I completed the 5K. And then someone invited me to a 10K, and I did the 10K. Then I did a half marathon. Then I did a marathon, and then I did another marathon, and I did it really well. I did a sub 4 hour marathon, which was
That's amazing.
in the top 1%,
Yeah.
and that's when I got bit by the bug. Then a friend of mine said, "Look, if you're doing marathons, why don't you pick up cycling?" And I was
Right.
like, "What's that?" And I looked at a bike and I started cycling. Then another friend said, "Well, if you're running and cycling, you might as well swim and do triathlons, right?" And so
That's
that really changed the
yeah.
trajectory of how I ran my life, right? So the sport really became an anchor, and that helped me
Interesting.
really prioritize everything from life to business.
And now you're taking this entire experience and you're actually coaching people and you're talking about it as a transformation architect, as a coach, as a public speaker.
Yes. Yeah. So my
And who's
first
your
task,
audience?
entrepreneurs,
Okay.
entrepreneurs. So my first task with all clients, session one, in the first 10 minutes, it's is the systematic raising of their awareness, right? Uh, so I believe you can change anything, provided you understand the root of what's driving your behavior. So that understanding is basically the foundation. It's the access point to transformation. So I call myself a transformation architect because if you look at architecture, like really beautiful architecture, it has integrity,
Hmm.
right, in its structure. And it has integrity in its structure because of the foundation. So I
Right.
asked myself, how can I bring that integrity into transformation? Because if you look at the self-development industry, right, it's a multi-billion dollar industry. But what they figured out is that if we can sell Faizan workshops, talks, if we can sell him keynotes, right, master classes, he's just going to keep buying it over and over and over again because they're not actually getting to the root of transformation or the root of the problem, which is why 95% of people who try to adopt a new habit fail within the first month, right? Because it's really, really difficult. So you really have to get to the root of why you're looking to change this behavior. What's driving it to begin with? So that's what I do in my work as a transformation architect.
Interesting. Your point reminds me of this book that I had read and I have restarted reading. It's by Charles Duhigg. It's The Power of Habit. And I
Habits,
think
yeah.
in that he talks about this cycle, right? It's basically a habit is your mind's way of making things simpler, right? If it sees something, it suddenly triggers a response and you're done. So that way you don't have to think about everything because you're always constantly processing information about your surroundings, people, environment, and everything, right? So there's a cue. As soon as you see that cue, there is a routine that your body or your mind snap right into. And that's your habit. To
Yes.
counter that, you have to replace that same cue. So it's maybe the same friends you go out and hang out with on a Thursday night. But when you see the same friends hang out, rather than the routine being you picking up, a drink or something, is replace the routine with
Yeah.
something else, and then there's got to be a reward tied to that. And then your
Yes.
mind starts to recreate that, but it takes weeks, sometimes months, to remap your brain. And what happens is most people give up at the end of the first month. or the end of the
Correct.
first couple of weeks, and then they're like stuck back into that habit.
Yeah. They give up right before they're about to strike gold. Have you seen those illustrations where someone's digging
Yes.
and there's one more, there's just one layer left,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And right beneath it is the pot of gold and they stop? Yeah, that's very much the
And how do
case.
you get your clients to make that last effort to get them to that pot of gold? Like when they're struggling at that point, what typically is the best way to get past that mental block?
Look, I think language, it doesn't define us, but it's very definitive, right? I'm Indian, you're Pakistani. Right there, there's separation.
Right.
It's pretty benign, but separation nonetheless, right? Language can create fragmentation. I'm not saying it's bad, but what I would assert is that our innate nature is to unite and to connect, right? Not just with people around us, but with ourselves. So really having that intimate understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, right? And the language that we're using to really be clear as to why we're doing what we're doing, right? So in my work is all about the inner game, right? So what is the inner game? The inner game is the lens that we use to look at our relationships, our business, our career, and our health, right? It's the lens that you use to look at your world. Now, that lens is shaped by our confidence, your charisma, your self-esteem, your belief structures, your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
It's that conversation that you're having in the privacy of your mind, right? And that can be a really empowering voice. It can sound something like, Faizan, you can do it. Faizan, you have a great business. You have a great team. They think you're a phenomenal leader. Or conversely, it can be an incessant chatter in our head. It can sound something like, Dhiren, you're not good enough. You're too young. You're too old. You're in an industry that's saturated, right? Or what I hear most often, what if I fail? So the language that we use in the privacy of our own mind is what creates our reality. So I always say, be very specific with the language that you're using because it only creates your reality. So what I use is a model called CSBR, right? So a lot of our conditioning, our programs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Our memories, our values, right? These programs that were incepted in us or conditioned into us by our environment, teachers, friends, our parents, right? All that conditioning leads to a state, right? So right now you have a particular state, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be, a thoughtful state, right? We're engaged in conversation, right? Now that state brings about certain behavior, right? And the behavior then drives your results. So I always bring my clients back to, the state, right? How can you actually change the state that you're in at that moment, right? Because when we're trying to take on a new habit, if we're very clear as to why it is that we're trying to take on this new habit or break this habit, and we have that conversation, that positive, I don't like to use the word positive, but let's go with that word, that constructive, let's go with constructive conversation, and we keep reminding ourselves as to why we're doing what we're doing, it automatically changes our behavior, which then drives a new set of results.
Interesting. And I think that is the hardest part, is because when you are caught up in a habit loop, to remind yourself otherwise is actually very difficult, because it means that you have to break out of the loop to create a new thought pattern that intersects that.
Yeah, and the first thing to do is really to change the environment,
And
right? I
that
mean,
makes it easier, correct? Because that's when you're conscious of the habit. Because when the environment is different, you suddenly start noticing that one thing that I was doing doesn't fit right into this new environment. It did fit into the old one, but it doesn't fit in. Okay, now maybe the interruption makes sense. So it's
yeah.
easier for that interrupt to happen in that habit.
Yeah, I mean, going back to endurance sports, people ask me, I'd like to do a marathon or I'd like to do an ultra marathon. What do I do? Like, I just can't seem to get myself to do it. And my first response is find a community in your neighborhood, right, in your city, and prepay 6 months in advance. Find a coach in that community, right, and put the money down, right, make the investment. And by virtue of doing that, you're changing your environment. You're now around like-minded people who have the same goal. So when I first did this, I remember I went out to meet this group, and after a couple of sessions, some of them took my number down, right? And what followed, a couple of weeks after that, I missed a few sessions, and I started getting calls. They were like, "Where are you? We haven't seen you in a while," right? So that was the access point to me adopting this habit, is getting my environment conducive for me to be able to be successful in that new habit that I was trying to adopt.
And I have to attest to that. I think that is, you've hit the nail on the head. It is the community that you have around you. And I tell you, like, I'd been wanting to do something in endurance sports. I took advantage of my jet lag as soon as I was traveling this summer, and I came back and I was waking up at 5. And a friend of mine pulled me into a community saying, "Look, you've been wanting to do this. Take advantage of the jet lag. Just come join us for a run." And it was a group of runners here in town who all prepare for everyone's preparing for a marathon at some point somewhere, whether it's a local or international marathon. And my first run was an 11K in which I died, practically. And I run regularly. Like, I would do 6, 7K. So to go from 7 to 11 was like a jump. I was like, okay, wow, that's interesting. Then the next time I ran, I ran another 11 or 2 weeks for an 11. And I was done. I remember one Saturday we were running, I was done. And there's a group of 3, 4. They're like, "Hey, listen, we're going out for another loop. You want to join us? Come along." I was like, "Yeah, but I think I'm done. Like, I don't." No, you'll be fine. Come. So okay, I'll come. I did about 15, and my body's falling apart. And I'm like, "Guys, I have to slow down." "Okay, we'll slow down with you." So they slowed down with me. They walked in, like, "You ready to run?" I said, "Yes." "Okay." We ran again. Then I had to slow down, run again. Next thing you know, I finished 18. Then the next week they're like, "Hey, listen, let's go out again." This time I was like, "I think I'll be able to keep up." Did another 18. And then finally, just last weekend, I ran with the group, but I ended up running alone towards the end, and I finished a half, 21K for the first time in my life. And I sent a message on the group, and I told everyone, I said, "Guys, there's no way I could have done this without you." Even though no one ran with me in my 21, like towards the end, I was alone. But just knowing that you all were there and you understood sort of the frame of mind, and there was everyone saying that, "Hey, you can do it, go, God," like just that support.
Yeah.
And having those people around, there was no way this was going to happen without it. So the community, I completely agree, is having the right people around you that all have the new habit you want to create. If you don't,
they held you accountable.
Exactly. Because you see them, they are you in the future with that habit that you're trying to adopt. And they help you remain accountable to yourself. And I think that is something that most people often forget. They think they're going to do it alone and they'll get there. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a coach like yourself comes in handy, because, a coach helps you stay accountable.
That's true. I mean, that's what really coaching is about, is having someone hold us accountable, especially for entrepreneurs, right? Because who do we report to, right?
Our coach.
If you have one. But if you don't, I mean, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. It's lonely at the top, right?
Right.
We don't really have, people don't understand. It's a special breed of human to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
It's the most difficult journey there is, right? I mean, was it Reid Hoffman? I think it was Reid Hoffman that said entrepreneurship is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane before you hit the ground. Like, by default, you're dead.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really challenging. Now, if you can add a layer of accountability in the journey, it makes things not easier, but less difficult.
Right. True. That's so true. And so if someone wants to bring you on as a coach, how do they get in touch with you?
So you can reach me on the in the social web, Dhiren Harchandani at Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn under the same name, Dhiren Harchandani. Yeah, that would be the best way.
And do you also coach if they want to do endurance sports?
I don't, but I can definitely put them in touch with several coaches who are very, very good depending on what they want to do.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
Jared, thank you so much. What a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I'm motivated to go run and build a business at the same time now.
Beautiful.
And I hope you enjoyed the time here as well. And hopefully we can have you back once again soon.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Faizan.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Stay tuned for more Digitales next week. Bye-bye.